Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest. We're in the deep depths of the NBA offseason. Riker's off in Peru, so we got a solo pod. He's exploring the world, living life, so we got a solo pod for the next couple videos. I just moved back to school, so it's been busy times, but not for the NBA. It's not been a busy time for the NBA. It seems like no news has come out. Kawhi Leonard bought a house in Toronto, which is pretty cool. He's not renting, so nothing really significant to make a video on. As the news starts coming in and the season starts coming up, we're going to have the content firing for you guys, so keep an eye out for that. But with this void in NBA news, Raptors news, it got me thinking, who is the most valuable piece to the Toronto Raptors? It's kind of a rabbit hole that my mind went through. And you look at it first, you saw the title of the video. It's probably already in the comment section. Why didn't I just start the video and say Kawhi Leonard? He comes in. We just signed him traded for him the offseason. We traded DeMar DeRozan for him. He's going to come in, be our best offensive player, best defensive player. Well, definitely best defensive player. You might be able to argue Kyle Lowry on a good day, but I think that's a tough argument. Kawhi Leonard is a top 3 NBA player, if not top 2. So on the court, there's no debate about Kawhi. But as you look deeper into it, I don't think Kawhi is the right answer to that question. You look at him right now, and he's on a 1-year deal. I know there's a lot of optimism around Raptors land, and even on this podcast, that Kawhi Leonard is going to stay long-term, which is definitely the hope. But right now, he's on that 1-year deal, and there's some uncertainty and risk behind Kawhi Leonard. And you could take a look at some of the young guys, and maybe there's some people in the comment section that are saying, Fred, OG, Siakam, those are probably our 3 most valuable young pieces, and you can make a debate on which one. I say OG, but you can debate that all you want. But I don't think those guys are more valuable than Kawhi either. So if it's not Kawhi, it's not OG, it's not Siakam, it's not Fred. Who is the most valuable piece to the Toronto Raptors organization? And personally, after giving it a lot of thought, and it's something that's been on my mind the past couple weeks, I think it's Masai Ujiri. Now, I know to some listeners that might sound like blasphemy, as obviously Masai Ujiri, he doesn't play. He's not on the court at all. He doesn't put any buckets. He's the Toronto Raptors president of basketball operations. So how could he have more of an effect on the Raptors team than a guy that actually gets us wins, gets us W's, and performs on the court? But I think the value and the impact of Masai Ujiri has been grossly understated amongst all Raptors fans and reporters over the past couple years. Masai joined the team following the 2012-2013 season. The Raptors had just missed the playoffs once again with a 34-48 record. We had just traded for Rudy Gay midseason. He was supposed to come in and be our absolute savior. Obviously, that turned out as a complete mess, and obviously by the fact that we didn't make the playoffs. And it just seemed like the Raptors were in a constant state of limbo, rebuilding, and not going anywhere as a franchise. But as soon as Masai comes in, and I'll go into all the moves and the great trades he made later, but without fluking into a big name free agent, a superstar free agent, or a monster breakout season from a young player, the Raptors went from the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference to the 3rd seed. And this is without, the Lakers are going to make a huge jump in the standings this year because they signed LeBron James. There wasn't any big moves that could have been made for the Toronto Raptors. And Masai Ujiri turned us from a dumpster dweller to a playoff contender, and that's something that was never done for the Toronto Raptors before. We've never had a jump like that in franchise history. And if you want to look at his overall impact, you can just look at the team he left. The Denver Nuggets, a team that's similar to the Toronto Raptors, as in they can't really bring in any big-name free agents. They were a consistent top seed in the Western Conference, the tougher Western Conference. They were a consistent playoff seed, but as soon as Masai Ujiri leaves, they go from 3rd seed in the tough Western Conference to 11th. That jump from the jump that the Toronto Raptors had when he came to us was the same regression that the Denver Nuggets had once he left. And the success he's had in Toronto has been maintained through his whole reign as Raptors GM/president of basketball operations. Masai inherited a very flawed basketball roster. If you look at the team that we had in 2012-2013, our best 3 players were Rudy Gay, DeMar DeRozan, and Kyle Lowry. But we have to look at these 3 guys in the context of the 2012-2013 season. Rudy Gay was an isolation guy that every Raptors fan saw pretty quickly, ever since he was traded to the team, that he wasn't going to be the guy that was going to lead us to the promised land. You don't want Rudy Gay as one of your top tier guys on a team if you want to be successful. DeMar DeRozan, he was a young slasher that really didn't have a jump shot in a league that was moving towards a fast-paced three-point shooting style. So there's a lot of question marks to how DeMar DeRozan would fit in this future league. And Kyle Lowry, a very talented point guard that really couldn't fit anywhere. He didn't even like Toronto, and he's came out and openly said that he did not want to be in Toronto when he was there his first season. So that's a really tough starting off point for an NBA GM to take over. And out of the scrap parts that Brian Colangelo left over, Masai has crafted a team that has had home court advantage every season he's been involved with the roster. He built teams that perfectly complemented DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry's strengths while negating their downfalls. And you can see this through the moves he made. He traded Rudy Gay, he flipped Rudy Gay for a bunch of solid role players that perfectly built the glue for the Toronto Raptors to take an immediate step forward. Rudy was traded for Greivis Vasquez, Patrick Patterson, Chuck Hayes, and John Salmons. 4 guys that Chuck didn't play a major significant role his first season, but the rest of them were all rotation guys that, they had their flaws, but they worked well in the Toronto Raptors system at the time and ignited our first playoff berth in 5-6 years. That offseason, we retained Lowry and somehow flipped John Salmons for 6th Man of the Year, Lou Williams, and also as well as Bebe Nogueira, who gave some solid minutes. But Lou was significant that following season, but unfortunately for injuries and a lack of defense, our playoff run was cut short. Masai saw that the Raptors need to improve on defense and adjusted the roster accordingly. He let Lou Will and Greivis Vasquez go and brought in Damari Carroll, Bismack Biyombo, and Norman Powell. Now, I'll get into Damari Carroll after, but look at how his other 2 signings, under-the-radar players, Norman Powell was the 46th pick in the draft, and Bismack Biyombo was picked up for a league minimum. Look at the impact that they had that season.
Huge shot by Terrence Ross, and there's the rookie, Norman Powell, with a steal and a dunk.
DeMar, wide open look, doesn't go. Bismack with the thunderous slam. How about big business? 8 points, 4 rebounds. Wade to the rim, denied. In the finger wag. The other way to Biz. Yes!
Despite the big name free agency signing being struggling with injuries all season, the Toronto Raptors had their best season in franchise history, making the conference finals. And it's crazy to think that he did this in such few seasons. He turned the team from a 10th seed to a conference finalist without getting any number 1 picks or crazy big free agents that had any impact. The next season, Kyle Lowry had a hand injury, so the Toronto Raptors regressed a decent bit, but we traded Terrence Ross for Serge Ibaka, filling a hole that the Toronto Raptors, a significant hole that we had at the power forward for many seasons. Then last year, Masai Ujiri rehauls the role players, crafting the perfect team to surround DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. They have the bench mob, they have solid role players in the starting lineup, giving this core its best ever chance of making the NBA Finals. The team makes the first seed in the Eastern Conference, handily wins the first round against the Wizards, except maybe a couple slip-up games, but then we play the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it shows true that the team cannot win a championship with DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry as your 1A, 1B guys. You need a true superstar to win a chip. Masai Ujiri saw that and flipped DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl for Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, bringing in the superstar that the Raptors need. Masai Ujiri just brings in the guys that the Toronto Raptors need. That's what he does without any superstars electing to go there, like LeBron James to the Lakers, or Chris Paul to the Rockets, or even Gordon Hayward to the Celtics, or Kevin Durant to the Warriors. He's done that without any of the free agent recruitment and without tanking, like the Sixers. The Sixers have, just being awful for 4 or 5 years to pick up Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and we'll see how Markelle Fultz goes. While winning, while being one of the most successful teams in the NBA, Masai has built a young core around this team that no matter what happens with Kawhi Leonard or Kyle Lowry, we still have some great young players to build off in the future. With late first-round picks, second-round picks, and picking up undrafted guys, he's brought in players that could maybe become stars one day, arguably. OG Anunoby was a late first-round pick. Pascal Siakam was a late first-round pick. Fred VanVleet was undrafted. Norman Powell, I know there's a lot of flack for Norman Powell, but he gave us 2 really solid playoff runs and, maybe could revive his career. He was a second-round pick. DeLon Wright, he was a late first-round pick. The Raptors didn't have the luxury of picking, top 5 every year like the Boston Celtics or the Philadelphia 76ers. Aside from maybe Bruno, who was a net positive for the Raptors as he brought in a D-League, Masai Ujiri has not had any misses in the NBA draft. The fact that he could do this while building a continuous perennial contender in the Eastern Conference and now a possible contender for the NBA championship speaks volumes to how valuable he is to the Toronto Raptors organization. Every move he makes seems to work out in the Toronto Raptors' favor. Just looking at some of the trades he's made in the past. His first one, trading Andrea Bargnani and his lucrative contract and his awful defensive skills to the New York Knicks for Steve Novak, who was a decent role player, a second-round pick, and a first-round pick that ended up being the 9th overall pick in 2016, which was Jakob Poeltl. That's absolutely ridiculous how he could get a first-round pick for the player that had 0 trade value, Andrea Bargnani. He flipped Graves Vasquez into the 2 picks that became Norman Powell and OG Anunoby. He traded Graves, who is currently out of the league, for Norm and OG Anunoby. He traded John Salmons for Lou Williams and Bebe Nogueira. Even though Lou only stayed 1 year, which was a choice by the Toronto Raptors, we traded John Salmons and his old playing style for a guy that became 6th man of the year. But personally, I think the thing that is the best quality about Masai Ujiri is the moves that he doesn't make. Masai Ujiri always lets things play out, see how they go, and see if there's anything we can optimize from the current roster that is put forth by the team. This could be first shown when he first showed up. It could have been very easy for him to say, let's trade everybody, and he almost did. But once he traded Rudy Gay, he wanted to see how this new roster accumulation of parts could play together. And without his patience, without his ability to not rush into a deal with New York, we got the greatest run in Raptors basketball history. Masai patiently evaluates the roster and knows when to strike a deal. After the 2015 playoffs, everyone said that we needed to trade DeRozan and fire Casey and blow the whole thing up. But Masai saw that the team could be optimized with better role players, and then we go on to have the best season in franchise history. It seems like there's a point every year where 70% of the fan base demands that the Toronto Raptors make a move on Jonas Valančiūnas. But Masai didn't rush into anything stupid at any point. And now we look at Jonas and he's developing a 3-point shot. He's getting quicker. He's coming into the prime of his career now. And he's a very valuable piece coming into this upcoming season. Masai is willing to make the unpopular move for the betterment of the Toronto Raptors team. In 2015, the Raptors needed to improve on defense, so he lets fan favorite Lou Williams walk and fan favorite Graves Vasquez go for Norman and OG. Right, those were tough to swallow as Raptor fans, and there was a lot of uproar that we traded some of our fan favorites, but inarguably those turned out for the better for the team. Bismack Biyombo is one of the most historically awesome, that's the way to put it, playoff runs for the Toronto Raptors. And Masai knows that he shouldn't pay Biz $18 million a year that following season like the Orlando Magic. Anyone that kind of like the Toronto Raptors wanted Bismack Biyombo back on the roster. And Masai knew that that price wasn't a smart move for the team. And obviously Biz is one of my favorite players of all time, but he was just traded for Timofey Mozgov. That wouldn't have been a smart move for the Raptors to keep Biz at that price. And this offseason, at the beginning of the summer, you can look back to me and Riker's podcasts. We wanted the Raptors to make a move. Do something. We didn't want to run it back with the same team. We're flaming Masai Ujiri. Please do something. Stop coming out with rumors. We just need something to be done. And nothing happened. Nothing happened through all of June and July. And, we were frustrated. We were frustrated as fans, but Masai saw no moves that made the Toronto Raptors better. Then when we all had calmed down and we accepted the fact we're going to run it back with the same team, he throws a bombshell and trades Mr. Toronto himself, for a top 3 player in the NBA. That was unpopular. There's a lot of people that are still angry that we moved DeMar DeRozan. But objectively, we made the roster better, and we are going into the season with the best Toronto Raptors team we've ever had in our franchise's history. There are only a couple blemishes on Masai Ujiri's history with the Toronto Raptors. And one is DeMar Carroll, who at the time was the perfect fit for the Toronto Raptors coming in. The only reason he's a blemish is because he got injured on the team and really couldn't get back to his Atlanta form. So that's not really on Masai because he can't predict the future when it comes to injuries. But I think a healthy DeMar Carroll would have been the perfect fit that 2016 team needed. And the second is Norman Powell. Norman Powell was never given consistent run in his first and second years in the NBA, but still found a way to give Raptors fans some of the greatest playoff moments in Raptors history. That dunk against the Pacers and shooting almost 100% from 3 against the Bucks. Norman Powell showed up in the playoffs. And I guarantee you, if the Raptors didn't give him that contract extension, some other team would have. Some other team would have paid him that money just for what he showed, the potential he showed in the NBA playoffs on the brightest stage he's ever played on. The Raptors were hurting for playoff contributors, players that could actually show up in the postseason, and Norm was one of those guys, so we needed to keep him. I guarantee you more people will be frustrated thinking about the what if of Norm than giving him that big contract and seeing him not do so great with it. Now, the jury's still out on Norm. He could still be a decent player in the NBA, and there's a lot. Nick Nurse has talked about integrating him back into the system. He still has a lot of potential. He's a young guy, but that's also currently a blemish on his resume, and that downfall of Norm was very unpredicted and was honestly a product of DeLon Wright and Fred VanVleet showing that they're irreplaceable rotation guys in OG Anunoby. So it's going to be interesting to see. We've talked about Norm a lot on this podcast, but looking at it holistically, he took a garbage franchise and turned them into a top seed in the Eastern Conference over the next 5 years. While doing so, he built one of the best young cores in the NBA without aid of a free agent signing, a huge free agent wanting to come to Toronto, or fluking into a number 1 pick, or a garbage franchise giving you 3 top 3 picks. And on top of all this, he did the unthinkable for a Toronto Raptors team and brought a true superstar to the roster. He brought in a true NBA superstar, a top 3 caliber player to the team, and I think that speaks to the value that he has to the organization. Players will come and go. Players will get injured, players will get frustrated, players will rise, and players will decline. But having Masai Ujiri as a constant, you know that the Toronto Raptors will have a coherent, competitive team that will always be fun to watch and will always be on the upward trend. This might be a different argument if Kawhi Leonard is signed for a long-term deal, just solely off his talent and what a superstar means to a team. But the fact that we know that we have Masai Ujiri locked up long-term on the Toronto Raptors, the things that he does for this team, I think he's the most valuable person in the Raptors organization right now. But let me know what you guys think. Is Masai Ujiri the most valuable guy, or is it blasphemous to think that the most valuable guy in a franchise could be someone that doesn't even step on a court? So let me know in the comment section below. As we said, we're going to try and get more content coming as the season gets closer, but once the season hits, once the news start hitting, we'll be ready to cover it. You're the best for listening. Check out the Twitter, the Instagram, all that cool stuff. And yeah, you're the best. Cheers.